Hey everybody, it's Steve. We're back with the second part of our lesson on the book of Acts, and we're in we're in verse 11 right now. So if you missed the first part, go ahead and check that out first, because everything will make more sense like that. So we're going to pick it up right here, Acts 6:11. And they suborned men, which said, "We have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moses and against God." So this was a proven path. They knew, those that hated the Christians, they knew that this path would work because they've already tried it once. It already worked against Christ. No reason why it shouldn't work a second time. Verse 12, "And they stirred up the people and the elders and the scribes and came upon him and caught him and brought him to the council." So when they arrested Christ, well, they went out and they got the police. They got the Romans. And when they were finished dealing with him, they gave him to Pilate. They made the Romans crucify Christ. They made the Romans kill Christ. Now these guys, they've lost patience by this point. They're not going to bother with the show, because clearly that was a show. They're not going to bother with the show this time. They went out and they picked him up themselves. They got a crowd of people. They went out and they picked him up. And they drug him before the council, which was probably the Sanhedrin, the 70 men. So they bring him into this room and they set him in front of the people. They set him in front of the council. Acts 6 and verse 13, "And set up false witnesses, which said, This man ceaseth not to speak blasphemous words against this holy place and the law." They accused him of blasphemy, the sin of blasphemy, speaking ill against God. In verse 11, they said that he committed blasphemy against Moses and God. And here in verse 13, against the temple and the law. Now, bear in mind that in order to make these charges, they're lying. And in order that the very act of lying in the name of God is a bigger sin than anything that they accused him of. The Apostle Paul, in the second chapter of Romans, he's railing. He's railing against these people that are proud and mighty and are deep in their sin. And I really wanted to read the whole thing. I wanted just to read the whole chapter, but I didn't think it would work all that well. But let me read you verse 23. Romans 2, the 23rd verse. "Thou that makest thy boast of the law through breaking the law, dishonorest thou God?" Yeah, they spend their time boasting about the law, and now here they are in this place doing the worst possible sin. Stephen said something that Christ said, but the words were distorted at the trial. Now, how about this? "And said, This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days." That was spoken of Christ. This fellow said, "I am able to destroy the temple of God and build it again in 3 days." Matthew 13:2, "And Jesus answering said unto him, Seest thou these great buildings? There shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." And then John 2 and 19, "Jesus answered and said unto them, Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." John adds, as an aside to that verse, he says, but he spoke of the temple of his body. Acts 6:14, "For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth shall destroy this place and shall change the customs by which Moses delivered us." I'm going to read that again because it's important. Shall destroy this place and shall change the customs which Moses delivered us. That's the point. It's not about the religion. No. It's about they're afraid that these guys, this religion, this Christ, is going to destroy their way of living. Let's just say that you lived in a popular tourist spot. You lived on one of the barrier islands where there was a lot of tourists that come. Let's say you lived in Orlando and you've got a thriving business. You sell tourist trinkets, because that's what these people do. They're in Jerusalem. They're right next to the temple. It's right there. And all these people come from all over, and they come in and they buy meals and they buy trinkets, and it's their living. And they're afraid that these Jews or these new Christians are going to end all that, and that's, in my opinion, the reason all this is happening. It's about change and fear of change. My Penny, my beautiful wife, oh, she doesn't like change. Every once in a while she'll come home from Walmart and they've reset one of the sections, and she won't talk for a couple hours. She's pretty mad about that. The threat to the temple was an economic threat. So they lied. What they lie about? They said that this Stephen had spoken blasphemous words. In verse 11, verse 13, that he ceases not to speak blasphemous words. They knew that this charge would work. It had already worked once, so they got no problem. They shouldn't have any problem making it work again. Verse 15, and all that sat in the council, looking steadfastly on him, saw his face as it had been the face of an angel. They were looking at Stephen, and they saw his face, and it was remarkable. Maybe he was just looking pleasant. Maybe he was looking cheerful. Maybe he was looking pleased. Possibly he was looking serene. Well, I think it's a little more than that. I think it's something miraculous. Look at this. Matthew 28:3. His countenance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. That's Mark describing Christ. Here's Daniel in a vision. And his body was like the beryl, and his face the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like the color of polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. Like his face as the appearance of lightning. So, one more. Revelation 10, and I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face was as it were the sun, and his feet as the pillars of fire. I have an idea that this is what happens to people when they are in the presence of God. Your face changes like this. We saw it sometimes in the earlier on also in other places in Scripture. I think something miraculous was happening here to Stephen. I think he was set at peace. So his countenance was like lightning. Countenance like lightning. What would that be like?
Steve, what are you doing? I'm going shopping.
And then Stephen begins to speak. But you have to come back next week to hear that. We'll cover it all in the next lesson. Thank you so much for joining me. Push the like button. It matters, and you know it does. Leave me a comment if you don't mind, and we'll see you next week.